The abandoned mineral processing plant looked like a skeleton against the dawn sky. Its massive conveyor belts and sorting machinery had been stripped of anything valuable by Carnith salvage teams, leaving behind a maze of empty metal frameworks and dark tunnels. It was perfect for what Captain Sarah Chun had in mind. 50 Zarathi volunteers had gathered in the main processing chamber, their pale faces showing a mixture of determination and fear. They ranged in age from barely adult to middle-aged, representing every profession from musicians to quantum physicists. What they all shared was the look of people who had lost everything and were ready to try anything to get it back. Sarah stood before them, flanked by Marcus and Dr. Park. Behind them, holographic displays showed training schedules and basic tactical concepts. "First lesson," Sarah began, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. "Forget everything you think you know about conflict. The Carnith expect you to run, hide, or surrender. We're going to teach you to do none of those things." A young Zarathi male named Kill raised his hand tentatively. His family had been killed in the first Carnith raid on his village. "Captain Chun, we understand that we must fight back. But our people have never harmed another living being. How can we learn to do violence?" "You're not learning to do violence," Dr. Park corrected, stepping forward. "You're learning to be obstacles. To be problems that are too expensive to solve." She activated a hologram showing a typical Carnith patrol formation. These soldiers are trained to deal with direct confrontation from other military forces. They know how to handle weapons fire, formal battles, organized resistance. They don't know how to deal with targets that disappear before they can be engaged. Marcus opened a case and pulled out what looked like a simple gray paste. "This is thermite compound modified for Zarathi use. It's not designed to kill anyone. It's designed to destroy equipment. Vehicles, communication arrays, mining equipment." A female Zarathi named Vera, who had been a transport engineer before the invasion, examined the compound with scientific curiosity. "The chemical composition is fascinating. How do you trigger the reaction?" "That's your first practical lesson," Marcus replied with a grin. "But first, you need to learn how to get close enough to your targets without being detected." The next 3 hours were spent on basic stealth techniques. The Zarathi had natural advantages that Sarah hadn't anticipated. Their light bone structure made them naturally quiet, and their pale coloring actually helped them blend into the industrial environments where Carnith operations were concentrated. "Your people evolved in cave systems originally, didn't they?" Dr. Park observed as she watched a group of volunteers practice moving silently through the tunnel system. Kill nodded. "Before we developed surface cities, the Zarathi lived in extensive underground networks. We still use them for transportation and deep mining operations." That explains a lot," Sarah muttered, making notes on her tablet. "Your natural environment gives you every advantage for guerrilla operations." By the end of the first week, the volunteers had learned basic reconnaissance techniques. They could observe Carnith operations without being detected, identify valuable targets, and navigate the tunnel system to report their findings. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. The real test came on the 8th day. "We've identified a priority target," Sarah announced to the assembled trainees. "The Carnith have established a communications relay station in the old university district. It coordinates all their mining operations and patrol schedules." Vera raised her hand. "You want us to destroy it?" "I want you to make it stop working for a while," Sarah corrected. "Long enough to disrupt their coordination and show them that nowhere on this planet is safe for their operations." The plan was simple. A team of 5 volunteers would use the tunnel system to approach the communications station. They would plant thermite charges on the main power coupling and the primary antenna array, then withdraw before the charges detonated. Total time in enemy territory, 15 minutes. Kill volunteered to lead the team, along with Vera and 3 others. They spent 2 days rehearsing the mission in a mock-up facility that Dr. Park constructed in the tunnels. "Remember," Marcus said as he checked their equipment one final time, "this isn't about being heroes. It's about being ghosts. Get in, do the job, get out. If anything goes wrong, retreat immediately." The night of the mission, Sarah watched through remote surveillance equipment as the 5 Zerathi approached their target. They moved through the tunnels like they had been born to it. Emerging from a maintenance access point just 50 meters from the communications station, the Karnath guards were focused on watching the streets and surrounding buildings. They never thought to watch the ground beneath their feet. Vera reached the power coupling first, placing the thermite charge exactly as she had been trained. Her hands shook slightly, but she completed the task within the allotted time frame. Kill and another volunteer placed charges on the antenna supports while the other two maintained watch. Everything went perfectly until they were withdrawing. A Karnath patrol made an unexpected route change, walking directly toward the maintenance access point just as the team was preparing to descend. Sarah watched helplessly as the 5 Zerathi pressed themselves against the walls of nearby buildings. Trying to avoid detection, the patrol stopped directly above the access point. "Abort!" Sarah whispered into her communicator. "Find another extraction route." But Kill was already moving. Instead of panicking or trying to run, he did something that surprised everyone watching. Including the Karnath patrol, he walked directly toward them. "Excuse me," Kill said in Galactic Common, his voice carrying the gentle, musical tone that all Zerathi possessed. "I am looking for my dwelling. The bombing last week destroyed many of the street markers. The Karnath soldiers, massive reptilian beings in heavy armor, looked down at the slight Zerathi with obvious contempt. They saw what they expected to see, another displaced refugee looking for his home. "Move along, scavenger," the patrol leader growled. "This area is off-limits to locals." "Of course, honored warriors," Kill replied, bowing respectfully. "Could you perhaps direct me toward the residential district?" As the patrol leader gave directions, the other 4 Zerathi slipped past them and into the tunnel system. When Kill finally departed, walking in the direction the patrol had indicated, he was alone on the surface. 10 minutes later, the thermite charges detonated. The communications station erupted in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Emergency alarms began wailing across the city as Karnath forces suddenly found themselves cut off from Central Command. In the tunnel beneath the University District, Kill dropped down through the access point to join his teammates. They were all staring at him with something approaching awe. "You walked right up to them," Vera whispered. "How did you know they wouldn't shoot you?" "I didn't," Kill replied quietly. "But they were expecting us to run or hide. They weren't expecting politeness." Sarah felt a surge of pride as she monitored the Karnath response. Confusion reigned in their ranks as unit commanders tried to coordinate without their central communications hub. Several patrol units took wrong turns and ended up in empty sectors of the city. 2 mining operations had to shut down because they couldn't confirm their security status. "First mission successful," she announced to the gathered volunteers. "The communication station will be offline for at least 18 hours while they bring in replacement equipment." But the real victory wasn't the disrupted operations. It was the change in the volunteers themselves. They had proven they could operate in enemy territory, complete their objectives, and return safely. The most peaceful species in the galaxy had just conducted their first successful military operation. Word spread quickly through the remaining Zerathi population. More volunteers appeared at the training facility, including some who had initially refused to consider violent resistance. "What changed your mind?" Sarah asked an elderly Zerathi female who had been a philosophy professor. "I watched the Karnath response to your attack," the professor replied. "For the first time since the invasion began, they looked uncertain, afraid even. It occurred to me that perhaps there is a moral obligation to resist tyranny, even for those who prefer peace." The training program expanded. Dr. Park developed specialized courses based on individual Zerathi skills. Scientists learned to sabotage mining equipment. Artists learned to create propaganda that could inspire resistance throughout the planet. Musicians learned to use their natural ability with sound to confuse enemy communications. By the end of the 2nd month, 3 more successful missions had been completed. A fuel depot had been contaminated with a chemical compound that made Karnath vehicles break down after a few hours of operation. A mining shipment had been redirected through the tunnel system to a hidden storage facility, depriving the Empire of a fortune in quantum crystals. Most importantly, a Karnath intelligence officer had been captured during a reconnaissance mission, providing valuable information about enemy plans and weaknesses. The capture had been Vera's idea. They always send individual officers to inspect sites before major operations, she had observed during a planning session. If we could isolate one of them in the tunnel system, we might be able to gather intelligence. The Zarathi homeworld of Kes Prime looked like a graveyard of dreams. Scattered across the barren landscape were the remains of once great cities, now reduced to crumbling towers and empty streets. The orange sun cast long shadows over the desolate terrain, where only the hardiest of scrub plants managed to survive. Commander Zeph of the Galactic Council stood on the observation deck of his cruiser, staring down at the dying world below. His forearms crossed behind his back as he reviewed the datapad in his primary hand. The numbers were worse than he had feared. Population down to 12 million, he muttered to his aide. A nervous Centauri female named Lisa. 3 years ago, they had 40 million. The raids have been devastating. Sir, Lysa replied, her tentacles twitching with anxiety. The Karnath Empire has been systematically destroying their defensive positions. The Zarathi barely managed to evacuate their last military base yesterday. Zeph shook his massive head. The Zarathi were known throughout the galaxy as the most peaceful species ever discovered. They had never developed weapons of war, never created military tactics, never even raised their voices in anger. Their entire civilization was built around art, music, and scientific discovery. They were also, unfortunately, sitting on one of the richest deposits of quantum crystals in the known universe. The Karnath Empire had noticed. "Send a message to the Council," Zeph ordered. "Request immediate evacuation support for the remaining population. We can relocate them to sanctuary worlds until—" "Sir," his communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from an unregistered vessel. They're requesting permission to land on Kes Prime." Zeph frowned. "Identify the ship?" "It's human, sir. A small transport vessel called Defiance. They claim to be offering assistance." "Humans?" Zeph's eye stalks drooped in confusion. The humans were a relatively new species to galactic politics, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. They were known for being unusually aggressive and having strange ideas about warfare, but they had never shown interest in the Outer Rim territories. What kind of assistance could humans possibly offer? Lesa wondered aloud. Before Zeph could answer, the human ship had already entered the atmosphere. It was a sleek, angular craft painted in dark gray with strange markings along its hull. It landed in the courtyard of what had once been the Zarathi capital's university. 3 humans emerged from the ship. The lead figure was a woman with short brown hair and wearing some kind of tactical uniform. Behind her walked 2 men, both carrying equipment cases and wearing similar clothing. They moved with a purpose that Zeph had rarely seen in other species. "Commander," his communications officer called again, "the humans are requesting a meeting with the Zarathi leadership. They say they want to discuss a training program." "A training program?" Zeph's confusion deepened. "For what?" Down on the planet's surface, Captain Sarah Chun of the Human Defense Corps was having the same conversation with a group of Zarathi elders. The meeting was taking place in what remained of the university's main hall, its beautiful crystal windows now cracked and dusty. "You wish to teach us violence?" Elder Mirren asked, her large blue eyes filled with distress. The Zarathi were tall, slender beings with pale skin and delicate features. They looked like they would break if someone spoke too loudly. "Not violence," Sarah corrected gently. "Defense, survival, there's a difference." Elder Koth, the eldest of the assembled leaders, shook his head slowly. "For 10,000 years our people have lived in peace. We have never harmed another living being. It is not in our nature." "I understand that," Sarah said, pulling up a holographic display from her portable projector. "But your nature is also why you're facing extinction." The Carnith Empire has decided your world is worth more without you on it. They won't stop until you're all dead or driven away. The hologram showed tactical displays of recent Carnith attacks. The aliens had been methodical in their destruction, targeting population centers and transportation hubs while avoiding the crystal mining sites. We have sent requests for help to every member of the Galactic Council, Elder Mirren said sadly. They all say the same thing: relocate, find new worlds. Except that Kes Prime is lost. We're not here to tell you to run, Sarah's colleague, Sergeant Marcus Webb, spoke up for the first time. We're here to teach you how to fight back. The elders looked uncomfortable at the word fight. Their language didn't even have proper terms for combat or warfare. What makes you think we could learn such things? Elder Koth asked. The humans are known to be natural warriors. We are not. We are weak. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the devastated seep. You want to know something interesting about humans? 150 years ago, we were fighting each other constantly. Wars that lasted years killed millions of our own people. We were really good at destroying things. She turned back to face the Zerathi. Then we met the galaxy. We discovered there were bigger threats out there than each other. So we learned to focus that skill, that aggression, in new directions. But the most important thing we learned was this: strength isn't about being naturally violent. It's about being willing to protect what matters to you. Elder Mirren's eyes glistened. Our children matter to us. Our art, our music, our history. Then you're already stronger than you think, Sarah said. You just need to learn how to use that strength. The third human, a woman named Dr. Lisa Park, opened one of the equipment cases. Inside were what looked like training devices and educational materials. The Carnith Empire has made one critical mistake, Dr. Park explained. They assume that peaceful means helpless. They expect you to run or hide. They're not prepared for you to stand and fight. Even if we wanted to learn, Elder Koth said hesitantly. We have no weapons, no military equipment, no knowledge of warfare. We're not talking about matching the Carnith ship for ship, Marcus explained. That would be impossible with your current resources. We're talking about asymmetric warfare, using your advantages against their disadvantages. Sarah activated another holographic display. This one showed the layout of Kes Prime's underground tunnel system, a vast network that connected every major city and settlement. You built these tunnels for transportation and mining, Sarah observed. But they're also perfect for guerrilla warfare. The Carnith forces are too large to fit through most of these passages, but your people can move through them easily. You want us to hide in tunnels? Elder Mirren asked. I want you to control the battlefield, Sarah corrected. Make them fight on your terms, in places where your size and knowledge of the terrain give you the advantage. Dr. Park pulled out what looked like a simple electronic device. This is a communication scrambler. Human design, but built with Zerathi crystalline technology that we found in your abandoned research stations. The Carnith can't intercept or decode transmissions sent through your own quantum crystals. Elder Koth examined the device with growing interest. This is ... ingenious. We never thought to use the crystals for communication security. That's because you never needed to before, Marcus pointed out. But now you do. And this is just the beginning. Sarah pulled up a chair and sat down facing the elders. Here's what we're offering. 3 months of intensive training for volunteer groups from your population. We'll teach them reconnaissance, sabotage, escape and evasion, secure communications, and basic tactics. Nothing that goes against your fundamental beliefs about not killing, but everything you need to make the Carnith occupation so difficult and costly that they'll eventually decide this planet isn't worth the effort. Why would you do this for us? Elder Mirren asked. What do you gain from helping the Zerathi? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Because 50 years ago, when humanity first joined the galactic community, we were the newcomers. We were the ones who didn't understand how things worked, who made mistakes, who needed help. Some species helped us. Others didn't. We remember both. She stood up again and walked to another window. one that faced toward the spaceport where Carnith ships had been landing regularly to steal quantum crystal shipments. But more than that, we understand what it's like to have your home threatened by someone who thinks might makes right. We've learned that sometimes the only way to preserve peace is to be prepared for war. Elder Koth and Elder Mirren exchanged glances. In their long lives, they had never faced a decision like this one. "If we agree to this training," Elder Koth said slowly, "how do we know your methods will work? The Carnith have superior numbers, superior technology, superior firepower." Dr. Park smiled for the first time since the meeting began. "Because they also have superior arrogance. They think they know everything about warfare because they've been conquering peaceful worlds for centuries. They've never had to fight anyone who learned from humans." Marcus opened his equipment case and pulled out a tablet showing historical data. In human history, some of the most successful military campaigns were fought by smaller, supposedly weaker forces who used superior tactics and knowledge of their terrain. We call it asymmetric warfare, and it works because the stronger force expects to win through brute strength alone. The Carnith Empire has conquered 14 worlds in the past 20 years, Sarah added. Every single one of those conquests followed the same pattern. The orbital elevator stretched like a silver thread from Kess, prime surface to the Carnith command station hanging in the planet's upper atmosphere. For 3 months, it had been the lifeline that kept the Empire's occupation force supplied and coordinated. Every day, massive cargo pods carried stolen quantum crystals up while weapons, equipment, and reinforcements came down. Kill stood in the observation chamber of the underground facility that had become the Resistance headquarters, studying the elevator through a periscope array that Dr. Park had constructed. The structure seemed impossible to attack. Heavily shielded, constantly monitored, and defended by automated weapon systems, it represented the pinnacle of Carnith engineering. "It's not the elevator we need to destroy," Vera said, joining him at the observation station. "It's the foundation." 3 months of training had transformed both of them. Kill no longer looked like a frightened refugee. His movements were confident and precise, his eyes constantly scanning for threats and opportunities. Vera had become the Resistance's chief tactical planner, her engineering background proving invaluable for understanding enemy systems. "Explain," Sarah said as she entered the chamber. The human captain looked tired but satisfied. Reports from across the planet told the same story. Carnith operations were failing at an accelerating rate. Vera activated a holographic display showing the elevator's base structure. "The Carnith built this on the site of our old primary mining complex. They used our existing foundation systems, but they made one critical error. They assumed our construction techniques were primitive compared to theirs." She zoomed in on a specific section of the foundation. "Zarathi engineering is based on harmonic resonance. Our buildings are designed to work with the planet's natural crystal formations, not against them. The elevator's support structure is fighting against those natural harmonics every second it operates." Kill began to understand. "If we could amplify those natural resonances, the whole thing would shake itself apart," Vera finished. "But it would require precise coordination across multiple crystal nodes simultaneously, and we'd need to get teams into position without being detected." Sarah studied the schematic. In 3 months of working with the Zarathi, she had learned to trust their technical expertise. When they said something was possible, it usually was. "How many teams would you need?" 12, Vera replied immediately. 3 members each. They'd have to place resonance amplifiers at specific nodes around the foundation perimeter, then activate them in perfect synchronization. That's 36 people moving through the most heavily defended area on the planet, Marcus pointed out as he joined the group. "And if even one team is detected before activation, the entire mission fails." "Then we make sure they're not detected," Kill said calmly. "We've learned from the humans that the enemy only sees what they expect to see. The Carnith expect desperate attacks by obvious rebels. They don't expect methodical engineering by invisible technicians." Sarah felt a surge of pride. 3 months ago, Kill had been afraid to touch a weapon. Now he was planning operations that would have impressed veteran Special Forces commanders. "When do we move?" she asked. "Tonight," Vera replied. "The Karnath are cycling their guard shifts to deal with our recent supply line attacks. There will be a 2-hour window when their monitoring systems are operating with reduced personnel." As darkness fell across Kes Prime, 36 Zarathi resistance fighters began moving through the tunnel system toward their targets. Each team carried equipment that Dr. Park had designed specifically for this mission: compact resonance amplifiers that could tap into the planet's natural crystal network and amplify harmonic frequencies to destructive levels. Sarah and her human colleagues monitored the operation from the command center, watching as small green dots on their tactical display moved through the underground maze. The Zarathi had become masters of their subterranean environment, moving through passages that Karnath forces couldn't even detect, much less navigate. "Team 7 in position," came a whispered report over the communication system. "Team 3 in position. Team 12 in position." One by one, the reports came in. Each team had reached their designated node and was preparing to install their equipment above ground. The Karnath guards continued their patrols, unaware that the foundation of their most important facility was being systematically prepared for destruction. The elevator continued its routine operations, cargo pods rising and falling according to schedule. "All teams report ready for activation," Vera announced from her position at the communications console. She had insisted on personally coordinating the technical aspects of the mission. Sarah looked around the command center at the assembled Zarathi. 3 months ago, these beings had never contemplated violence against another living creature. Now they were about to conduct the most sophisticated military operation in their species' history. "Vera, you have authorization to proceed." "Activation in 5.4.3. Execute." At 12 points around the orbital elevator's foundation, resonance amplifiers came to life simultaneously. The effect was not immediately visible, but monitoring equipment in the command center began registering massive harmonic fluctuations in the planet's crystal matrix. "It's working," Dr. Park reported, watching data streams on her displays. "The resonance is building exponentially." On the surface, Karnath technicians began noticing irregularities in the elevator's operation. Warning lights appeared on control panels as the massive structure began experiencing micro-vibrations that weren't supposed to exist. "Sir, we're detecting structural anomalies in the support framework," a Karnath engineer reported to the facility commander. "The Foundation is registering harmonic disturbances." "Natural seismic activity?" the commander asked. "No, sir, these frequencies are too regular, too precise." The Karnath commander felt a chill of recognition. In 3 months of occupation, he had learned to fear the precision of Zarathi resistance operations. "Emergency shutdown of all elevator operations," he ordered, "and get me a full structural analysis." But it was too late. The harmonic resonance had reached critical frequency. Deep beneath the elevator's foundation, quantum crystals that had been formed over millions of years began vibrating in perfect synchronization. The energy buildup was enormous, and it was all focused on the artificial structure that the Karnath had imposed on the natural formation. The first visible sign was a crack that appeared in the elevator's main support column. It started small, no bigger than a human finger, but it spread with terrifying speed as the harmonic forces tore at the structural integrity of the alien construction. "All teams withdraw immediately," Sarah ordered. "The structure is failing faster than projected." On the surface, Karnath personnel were evacuating the elevator complex as warning sirens wailed across the facility. The massive support tower was beginning to sway visibly, its base crumbling as harmonic forces overwhelmed its structural design. "This is incredible," Dr. Park whispered, watching the destruction through remote cameras. "The Zarathi have turned the planet itself into a weapon." The orbital elevator collapsed in stages. First, the base supports gave way, causing the lower section to topple like a felled tree. The middle section followed, its connection to the orbital station severed as the structure twisted and buckled. Finally, the upper section broke free of its moorings and tumbled into the planet's atmosphere, burning up like a meteor as it fell in less than 20 minutes. The Carnith Empire's most important asset on Kes Prime had been reduced to twisted wreckage scattered across several square kilometers. All teams report successful withdrawal, Kill announced as the last of the strike teams reached safety in the tunnel system. 0 casualties. Sarah sat down heavily in her command chair. In her years of military service, she had seen many successful operations, but nothing quite like this. The Zerathi had just destroyed a megastructure using nothing but their understanding of planetary physics and perfect operational coordination. "Vera," she said, "remind me never to get on the bad side of Zerathi engineers." The response from the Carnith Empire was swift and predictable. Within 6 hours, 3 heavy cruisers had arrived in orbit around Kes Prime, carrying elite military units and advanced weapon systems. The Empire was done treating this as a simple occupation. They were preparing for total war, but they were 3 months too late. The Zerathi resistance had used their training time to establish supply caches throughout the tunnel system, recruit and train additional cells across the planet, and create a communication network that the Carnith couldn't intercept or disrupt. Most importantly, they had learned to think like soldiers while retaining their advantages as peaceful scientists and artists. The Carnith ground assault began at dawn. Elite shock troopers landed at strategic points across the planet, expecting to crush a ragtag resistance movement through superior firepower and aggressive tactics. They found nothing. The Zerathi had simply vanished into their tunnel system, taking their equipment and supplies with them. The surface cities were empty, the mining facilities were abandoned, and there were no targets for the Carnith forces to engage. "Sir, we've occupied every major population center on the planet," a Carnith colonel reported to his commanding general. "No,